Hello, Emerson, and welcome to tonight's episode of Speechless. I'm your host, Nina Palecchio, and today we'll be debating the issues that matter. Ready, set, speechless. First, we'll be discussing the issue of charity work in third world countries. Then, we'll be moving on to Russia's annexation of Crimea. And finally, will Netflix take over the future of television? We are midway through the season and the competition is really heating up. Today, we have the Vikings and the Spartans competing, the last of our debates before we begin the elimination rounds. We have the Vikings, who have been our dark horse of the season. They have yet to win a show, but their debates are always fiery and very close. We have the Spartans, who are actually undefeated this season. Will the Spartans continue their winning streak, or will the Vikings rise to power? Spartans, what is your secret to success so far in the competition?
You know, Nina, I think we've just been kicking butt all season, and we're ready to do it again tonight.
Kicking some butt?
Yep.
We play passionately, and once we get on a roll, there's no stopping us. On top of that, rationale, just sheer facts, and color coordination is our
Color
keys.
coordination is really a key here at Speechless. Well, Vikings, with Amber out sick for this debate, how do you plan on defeating a team that has gone undefeated?
Continuous passion and preparedness.
Passion and preparedness.
We've done our research, and I think we're ready to go.
Research is key. Well, in the 1990s, humanitarian efforts were made to address various international emergencies. The poor living conditions in nations like Somalia, Bosnia, and Rwanda compelled agencies to take action. However, whether these groups have caused effective positive change is controversial. They are accused of only briefly mitigating the symptoms of dire situations without tackling the deeper issues at hand. Worse yet, some critics suggest that such mission trips may have inadvertently perpetuated these issues. However, humanitarian proponents assert that the aid, even if sometimes misappropriated, provides a vital service for those in immediate and desperate need. So the question is this: did these humanitarian efforts yield a lasting positive impact, or were they costly ventures that did more harm than good? Debaters, let's start with the Vikings.
Well, we feel it's very obvious that in most cases, or a majority of cases, our charity work in foreign countries is actually doing more harm than good. Because people don't want our help. We send over people who don't know what they're doing, such as kids who are just going there for a resume builder,
Right.
and that there are other means of helping these countries that don't necessarily need our physical presence. So we want to look at the long-term solution today versus the short-term. And while some physical being there of humanitarian aid might provide some success in the short term, it definitely won't help us in the long term.
All right, and Spartans, what do you have to say for that?
Well, Nina, we're on the side that these humanitarian groups are actually helping. They've built many schools, healthcare centers, orphanage, as well as feeding programs that are vital to these third world countries. And without these humanitarian groups that we send over there, these countries wouldn't be able to get back on their feet. We're providing a vital purpose to help them out and really support the people who are in need over in these countries.
Now, your point on getting them back on their feet, do you guys think that these somewhat smaller programs are helping an entire country get back on their feet? Do you think that this is impacting that, or?
Well, we don't believe this at all,
Right.
because in most cases, the smaller ones are from private organizations coming over. Once again, they usually bring kids, people who don't know what they're doing. We've seen actually testimonials in the Huffington Post of kids who went on these mission trips and found out later that the work they had done during the day was so basically bad and unsafe.
The Huffington Post had an article about
Yes, and
Yes.
that the people who actually lived there had to come in and redo the work overnight so the kids would never know.
So it was almost like a trick.
Yeah.
Huh.
Was specifically what, for the Huffington Post, what organization specifically are you referring to?
Specifically, it was more of a while it didn't give the specific name of the organization, it talked about someone who, her name is Piper Biddle, who did not research, but volunteer work for years on end, only to find out that what the kids were doing, she went on this trip through her high school with this organization, but while they were building houses and schools, but the foundation was so unsafe and unstable that the locals who knew what they were doing had to physically undo their work at
But is
night.
that just
It
So they-
wasted,
yeah, but
so essentially it wasted productivity
But specifically,
and
that's
their
an isolated
labor
incident, and
instead
you're
of
not even
spending-
citing a specific
Well, the
organization.
girl
when you look at the
But
hard
I guess-
but when you look at the hard statistics for individual organizations, you look at the Peace Corps, for example, which is one of the largest and government-funded organizations in the United States. Since its inception, in the 50 years which it's happened, it has sent out 215,000 volunteers as a budget near $400 million a year, which it's pumping into these third world countries. It has reached over 139 different countries. Currently, there's 7,500 volunteers in 78 different countries. On top of that, if you look at independent organizations that are smaller than the Peace Corps, you look at the Bill Gates Foundation, which is currently working on vaccinating and sending over aid over there to vaccinate for malaria and various other diseases.
As well as
Bill
the aid
Gates-
that's helped over a dozen African countries fight against Malaysia. So as you're
Malaria.
sorry. So as you're speaking to one's independent case, if you look at all of the cases that we've compiled,
Yeah, Red
first of all,
Cross
you are just
raised
focusing on
$450
one.
million for Haiti. As
Okay,
I was
but
saying,
another
the
thing
Gates
that you're
One thing is,
organization-
while we are great, the Harvard School of Public Health also said, by looking at all these organizations, that we're great at immediate relief by providing food and flu shots, but we are not good at changing the structure to provide long-term sustainability and benefits so that the countries are able to sustain themselves. They keep relying on us as well
But
for this.
what do you say to the Gates organization individually, just the Gates organization, going in there, and it's approximated that it saved over 5 million lives?
Because
5
they've done
million
it
lives
through
by
flu
vaccination.
vaccination stuff like that. But we're
But
talking
they
about
send in-
we're
they
still
send in
saving
their
those
own
But we're
lives.
talking about
and they're implementing the
infrastructure in the
vaccination.
state's debate today.
But how's it not infrastructure if we send in people to
Because
vaccinate?
infrastructure is mostly building homes, like the Resolve says that we're talking about, like building
like building homes, like home
well,
buildings.
you can't
We're also
really
talking about
associate.
humanitarian groups who are going into countries, which includes the Peace Corps who work in home building.
Yeah.
But there's also tons of different things which humanitarian need groups
But-
go in there and help countries.
But a
But
lot of these
sometimes-
people do not know what they're doing. Yes, they have 240,000 people going in, but they're
What is the
volunteers as well.
statistic on that?
They
Do you
look
have a
good on
statistic that
paper.
these people don't know what they're doing?
Yeah,
Or is that
you
just that
don't
one
have hard
case?
statistics for the ineffectiveness. You have accounts for isolated incidents, but you don't have hard evidence
Yeah.
for the entirety of these charitable
Well, once again,
organizations.
in the Huffington Post article, it said that this girl had noticed this was a trend across organizations, and she did not give the names
But did
because
she
she didn't
work
want to
in-
be
But did she work
sued.
in several? Did she work
She
in
did
all?
say.
the
She did.
Did she work in all the organizations?
No, but you
Not
can't
all, but
say
she did
that.
work
But
for
if you're
several,
not citing
including the
specific
United States
instances
as
or
well.
specific organizations, how can we say this is happening?
Well, no, but we can
if
also
she's being
say.
vague enough that she's not saying specific
Well,
organizations, how can we trust
But we
her?
can also
Yes.
say that sometimes people there don't want our help, and we've seen a lot of incidences with terrorism, which is another thing today that we've seen. The Aid Worker Security Database shows that as of 2013, there were 337 total killings of aid workers, specifically because they were aid workers.
Okay, well then I'm gonna cite another statistic. From 1961 to 1999, in the Peace Corps, people were talking about security as being an issue. Less than 0.1% of the Peace Corps volunteers who were sent in were killed.
But that
Okay,
was
I gotta stop you guys
1999.
there. Debaters, thank you. It was a very good debate. I like originally what the Vikings said about the trips not necessarily helping, but building resumes. For a lot of the people, that is what they go there for. I've had some personal experience with the humanitarian type trips, and I know you see the girls who are like, oh yes, so put on my college resume that I did a humanitarian trip, I helped. That seems great. I did like what you guys said about the fact that they are providing health care, they're providing orphanages, they are providing schools for these people who are less fortunate than us. Here we are so privileged to be going to a wonderful school. We pay thousands and thousands every year. They don't have that. But what I really liked was what Bender said about immediate relief. It is not long-term relief what a lot of these humanitarian groups are doing. So the point is definitely going to go to the Vikings. Speechless is going on a short break, but don't worry, we'll be back faster than you can build an orphanage in Haiti. Welcome back, viewers. A couple months ago, the Ukrainian president, Viktor Yanukovych, and his cabinet announced that they were planning on cutting ties with the European Union to build stronger ties with Russia. The people of the Ukraine revolted against Yanukovych's decision in a series of violent protests that have been going on for the last few months. In response to the violence, Yanukovych fled the country, leaving his country split on whether or not to join Russia or the EU. 97% of one region of the Ukraine, in particular, Crimea, voted to join Russia. President Obama and the European Union have declared the Crimea-Russia situation a violation of international law because it would throw the European map into chaos, the likes of which we haven't seen since the end of the Cold War. It is believed that the reason America reacted so strongly to the Russia-Crimea situation was because of Putin is suspected of wanting to annex other nations in the future, which would be considered an act of war. Let's learn a little bit more about the U.S. foreign affairs and this potential Cold War.
BBC News states, the peninsula of Crimea in the southern Ukraine is at the center of what is being seen as the biggest crisis between Russia and the West since the Cold War. Crimea is an autonomous republic in the southern region of the Ukraine, located on the Crimean Peninsula on the Black Sea. Russia held the majority of control in Crimea over the past 200 years until a shift of power in 1954. The power was transferred by Moscow to Ukraine, which was at the time a part of the Soviet Union. Out of the 2.3 million people living in Crimea, those who identify as ethnic Russians and speak Russian see this power swap as a wrongdoing in history. President Putin agrees with this, expressing his beliefs in this video where he calls for Russia to annex Crimea.
Putin made it very clear that Crimea would be joining the Russian Federation. He talked about the fact that Russia felt robbed when Crimea was handed over to the Ukraine.
However, ethnic Ukrainians and Muslim Crimean Tatars disagree with this sentiment, expressing their region's separation from Russia and, therefore, Russia's lack of claim to the land. Troops loyal to Russia have taken control of Crimea, and the pro-Russian parliament has voted to join the Russian Federation to be confirmed in a referendum. Troops loyal to Russia have taken control of Crimea, and the pro-Russian parliament has voted to join the Russian Federation to be confirmed in a referendum. Many members of the European nations are skeptical of the supposed positive support of Russian control within Crimea. President Obama warned President Putin that any movement further into the Ukraine by Russian troops would be a bad choice. The United States, along with Japan, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, and the United Kingdom, made a decision to remove Russia from the group of 8 democracies. Since the Russian intervention in Crimea, President Obama signed an executive order that authorized sanctions to protect the sovereignty of the Ukraine.
Sanctions would not only have a significant impact on the Russian economy, but could also be disruptive to the global economy. However, Russia must know that further escalation will only isolate it further from the international community.
For tonight's debate, we ask, is the situation in the Ukraine a beginning of another Cold War, or are we just blowing this way out of proportion? Spartans, let's start with you.
Well, just to start, Russia's hostile invasion of the Crimean Peninsula is not only a violation of the Ukraine's right to political autonomy, but it's a violation of just international sanctions. And on top of it, it's an outright hostile act towards NATO, towards the European Union, and to the Ukraine specifically.
All right, Vikings, what do you have to say?
We don't believe that this will lead to any sort of Cold War. The last time we were about to go into a Cold War, there was tensions everywhere. Everyone was afraid. We were having duck and cover drills, which we clearly don't have now because you can ask anyone on the street what's going on in the Ukraine, and they have absolutely no idea. We believe that Russia really has no intentions of annexing other countries because Putin himself has said this. The United States doesn't believe this either, as Obama has said himself that this won't end up in a Cold War, and that Russia's hostile takeover, they simply went in there to help their military bases and things like that because Ukraine was in a total government overthrow. And while their actions may not be correct, it certainly wasn't to take over the entire area. And Russia has had very strong ties with Crimea before, so they were simply helping the area.
Specifically about Putin's quote about his said that he didn't want to annex other countries. He was also quoted as saying that when there was the Russian incursion, when he sent in troops to Crimea, that he said that anyone could acquire Russian uniforms, and he tried to cover up the fact that he did in fact invade Crimea. So can we trust his word to say he's not going to annex in the first place?
The thing
he was
is
quoted as saying that he was not going to.
The thing is that Putin said that anyone who doesn't regret the passing of the Soviet Union has no heart because he belongs to Russia. But he also said that anyone who wants to restore it has no brain. And he knows that this would cause very tense relations with the United States, and they really don't want to infuriate us right now because of our trade relations. Our trade relations are very well right now.
Where was that quote from?
We believe it was from CNN.
But,
I want to go back to the fact where you said nobody knows what's going on in the Ukraine right now because that's been a top headline in all newspapers for the past 2 to 3 weeks
But
now.
who do you know who's reading those?
Everybody, any journalist.
Anyone who's informed
How do
should
you
be
really know?
reading
How
this.
can you verify?
Because I've been talking about it in all
verify
my
because
journals.
you can look at the cover of the New York Times, you can look at the cover of
pick up
CNN,
any
you can look at the cover of
newspaper.
anything.
I know.
Any
It's
website,
all
any
over the
newspaper.
news.
Just saying that people aren't informed doesn't mean that it's not an issue.
Okay, but last time with the Cold
And
War,
who
we were
did you
seeing.
survey
I'm sorry.
that
Can I
said that
finish?
nobody
Can I
knows
finish this
what's
thought?
going on?
Well, last time when we were having a Cold War, we had widespread fear. Everyone was in fear.
But
Like
that's
every
an
moment
issue
of the
of
day.
information. That's an issue of people are not reading newspapers. That's not an issue that is not an issue.
you can't
No,
really
what we're
just
saying
make
is that
that.
there's no climate fear because Obama hasn't come out and
I'm-
said,
I'm-
"Oh, we need to be
I'm
afraid of
making-
Russia."
I'm going to make an analogy to the Cold War right now. In 1979, Russia sent troops into Afghanistan, specifically to Kabul, and it was under the guise of of something to keep their military base intact in Kabul. They sent about 700 troops. Very similar to that, they did the exact same thing in Crimea. They sent in troops in a very similar fashion as just a military reestablishment.
But they also
and then
have a
that
naval
eventually
base
escalated.
there.
That was an escalation of the Cold War. They invaded Crimea. They had no right to invade Crimea. They had no ownership of Crimea.
They don't, but they used to own Crimea.
Plus
So
they
they
also
do
have
have
a
a lot of
naval
naval bases there and a lot of military bases
Yeah,
there.
but specifically, was there a specific threat to the military base?
Yes, because the government in Ukraine was in complete overthrow.
But can you
Protesters in the
cite
street had been
specific
killed.
instances where the military bases attacked? Can you cite specific instances where the military bases were either threatened or attacked?
And you know what, I'm going to cut that off. I just want to go back to you when you said that Obama says it will not be leading to a Cold War. I'm kind of taking a guess here that you don't really understand what's going on right now.
No, I
But in the
do.
fact that the G8, the 8 most powerful countries in the world, recently just met, and they just went back down to a G7 and cut out Russia. Because they are
Actually, they haven't actually cut out Russia
Actually, yes,
yet,
they have.
because
It
that
was
was
in the
this
news.
morning that they were planning on meeting next week.
What do
right
you say
now.
specifically to the sanctions which were implemented by NATO and the United States? As of 6 hours ago, according to USA Today, and this is a direct quote, the United States and Europe have issued travel bans and asset freezes against 20 Russian officials and businessmen to deter the Kremlin from further aggression against Ukraine, where Russian troops have effectively taken over the province.
But we
of
also saw
Crimea.
that this morning. Obama told the Dutch newspaper, Volkskrant, in an interview that he published right when he got off the plane in Amsterdam, that the kind of thinking that Ukraine has to choose between the East and the West is what could lead to a Cold War. But Obama does not believe that Ukraine has to choose.
But what
We're
do
trying to help
you
them
say to
adapt
the
We're trying
sanctions?
to help.
what they want to
But what do you
choose.
say to the sanctions that were put in place?
I
That are
believe that-
very similar to sanctions that were put in place during the Cold War.
But we're still not seeing that fear. We're not there yet. And also,
But
Russia
that's going back to
hasn't.
the issue that they're not being informed. If it's on the cover of every major newspaper and every major news site, it's not an issue of that it's not a problem. It's an issue people are not being informed.
And maybe you're
But
not.
I'm sorry, how are people not being
No, but on
informed
top of that, with
on
the
the
Cold
cover?
War, it can be a the reason why they were ducking cover drills during the Cold War was because there were missiles implemented in Cuba, and there was a threat of mutually assured
but also-
destructions.
But
There can be a
newspapers
Cold
also have
War
their own
without there being a
biases as
threat
well,
on us.
so we don't know if
That's
it's
not true. I mean,
Well, hold on,
everybody
let her
has their own
finish, let her
bias, but
finish.
you can't say that newspapers have their own bias as well. Like, where are you
By
getting that
like-minded-
information?
by
from?
like-minded
Are you a
CNN.
journalism major?
I am not, but that doesn't mean I'm not a proponent of reading the news as well.
All right, I'm gonna have to cut you guys off there. So this is an interesting debate. I did like how you guys said that it was all over the news. It's definitely something that's out there. It's definitely something that most people have heard about. I know that all my friends in journalism have been talking about it nonstop. I mean, for leisure. I did like that you guys mentioned the fact that there isn't really the panic that there was during the Cold War. There's no duck and cover drills right now. There aren't really any like widespread fear of a Cold War exactly happening at the moment. But what I did like was that you guys mentioned the quote that you got from 6 hours ago, the travel bans and the Russian troops having taken over Crimea. So what were the points to the Spartans for this debate? My idea of a Cold War is my daily struggle with the shower. We'll be right back. Nowadays, watching TV might as well be a figure of speech. With so much of it being available online, what's the point of sitting down and dealing with the antiquated invention that is cable television? Websites like Hulu, YouTube, and especially Netflix have threatened the TV industry by providing users with a smorgasbord of content ready to be watched anywhere, anytime. In addition to that, Netflix is now releasing original series such as Emmy-winning political drama House of Cards and mega hit Orange is the New Black. There's hardly any reason to watch TV. Some believe that TV is still a medium that will never die. However, there are limitations to the quality of viewing experience from your computer, and certain shows cannot be found online. We asked the Emerson community what they thought the future of television as we know it has in store for us. Let's find out what they think. Will the Netflix original series format make cable television fade away over time? Let's start with you, Vikings.
Well, we say Netflix will not get rid of cable TV completely ever, and the number one reason is that, as history proves, other mediums will survive. Netflix started out as distribution, and if it wasn't for cable TV shows, CBS, NBC, etc., we wouldn't have all these shows to watch. It's essentially changing the distribution of how we watch media, and it's only just gotten into getting into its own original programming. It doesn't also have everything on there, as shows still get taken down as well. And in addition, there are more levels of content than what Netflix provides. There are other shows outside of that. So history and media really build on top of each other, and Netflix is just another way to watch our media.
Right. And Spartans, what do you have to say about that?
Well, basically, Nina, Netflix has almost 44 million subscribers in a recent 2014 poll from Polymate.com, and that number has been said to be increasing at a 33% rate from the previous decade. So as you can see, that is the subscribers are increasing fairly quickly.
And repeat that number again.
It's 44 million
44 million subscribers.
in
Wow.
2014.
Wow. So I mean, it's probably only gained more subscribers.
And then
than that.
specific points we want to hit, though, just throughout our argument, is that from the financial standpoint, Netflix is more cost-effective. At the average cost per month for cable television, $86 per month, which will raise to $123 by 2015, over $200 by 2020, as opposed to $7.99 a month for Netflix. Quality of shows this year, 14 shows on Netflix were nominated for Primetime Emmys, and originally the Emmys.
14 Netflix originals.
14 nominations for Netflix.
Okay.
And the Emmy Awards, it was a huge step that they got nominated because the Emmy Awards was for syndicated television. And if the highest award in syndicated television could be awarded to, I'm just going to hit.
Hold on 1 second.
I'm just going to bullet off my points real quick. If Emmys were able to recognize non-syndicated television for quality of show, that's one thing. In addition to that, as of July 2009, the average primetime TV show had 41% commercials. So 41% of the show, what you're watching, isn't even the show. And if Netflix is able to do it without commercials, the prompt specifically talks about, will cable TV with commercials fade away? Not just cable TV, but cable TV can adjust in a format where they will no longer have commercials and do something similar to Netflix. So it's not so much if it will fade away completely, but it could also be just commercials.
Gotcha.
the
Bender,
thing-
what were you
Sorry.
ladies? No.
The thing is that if we can't only just have Netflix out there, we need these cable TV shows
Right.
because if we were to only have Netflix, we'd only have those 14 shows, and no one just watches 14 shows. People watch all kinds of shows. I know, but I'm just saying that per year, it would be incredibly expensive for Netflix to try and create all the shows that come out every year. There's so many new pilots, so much new content. Also, we're seeing that people may be, going away from watching TV actually on their physical television, but they're still watching it on the computer. They're still watching the cable on there. They're streaming it through Xfinity, through Optimum. And the commercials, well, Netflix is one of the only places that doesn't have commercials, which is unusual. Hulu still has commercials. Even Hulu Plus has commercials. And so does Amazon, YouTube.
Yeah, so
Everyone
I mean,
does.
all these other sites that are kind of acting as, so it's similar to Netflix. Like, let's kind of get off Netflix for a minute. Do you guys think, just in general, that the cable television with technology advancing is going to go away? I mean,
It's going to adapt. And once again,
But adapting's not going away.
But the prompt says, will cable TV with commercials go away?
Well, it could
If
still have that.
Netflix was able to sustain a model, and specifically Forbes.com had an article which was published in 2014, which said Forbes called cable, satellite, and other forms of traditional TV unsustainable. Which say if they're using their current format, and this is from Forbes.com, that if they're using their current format with the 41% commercials of primetime television, it will be unsustainable. They will not be able to. The prices are going to rise. It's going to be replaced by Netflix.
But then why are
if they
commercials everywhere
reformat and make a new model which
on,
is
Bender, hold on.
sustainable, if they make a new model which is sustainable, they're talking about the current model which includes commercials. So if Forbes says that if they were to modify their model to do something similar to Netflix in which they do not incorporate commercials directly into it, according to the prompt, cable TV will not go away, but it's specifically talking about cable TV with commercials.
Well, we still believe
Modify
the
and
commercials
change.
will stay because we've seen that still, commercials have survived decades and decades. And just because Netflix, this one service, doesn't have commercials, doesn't mean that the other places aren't. Hulu only gets money from its ad revenues, and those are commercials.
YouTube
in
as well
itself.
does the same. YouTube as well gets its money off advertising, and plus advertising and money making. It's everywhere. It's everywhere on the internet as well, including sites where a lot of content is produced and streamed, such as YouTube, Hulu. But they're still there. They still have these commercials. They're not going away.
The public doesn't want to watch them.
But they're still there. They still have to.
But they still get paid.
But
They
on
still
top of
get
it, you can
paid.
do ad revenue where you have a advertisement on the side. You can have something like
That's
that.
that's almost a
All right,
commercial.
last thought here, last thought.
But for Netflix's model specifically, if Forbes says that cable TV cannot be sustained with commercials, and I believe Forbes, and if Netflix is able to do it effectively with so many good, great shows that's been
But
nominated,
Netflix is
All right, no, guys, I
distribution.
gotta cut you off. I gotta cut you both off. This was a really good debate. I love Netflix. All right. So what I thought originally was what you said. Cable's always going to be around because other sites would not be able. I mean, other sites wouldn't have anything to put if cable wasn't around. That was the original strong point, and I think that that is so valid. But another thing that I thought was, you said 14 Netflix shows have now gotten Emmy nominations. You have 44 million subscribers. Like, that's awesome. I mean, they're definitely doing something for themselves. And I mean, maybe what you said about the Forbes article that Netflix is going to be unsustainable without these commercials. But I almost.
No, I know I said cable TV.
But cable TV. My bad. But I almost think that I don't think so. I mean, I think that all of the sites already having the commercials anyway. I think that I'm going to have to give the points to the Vikings on this one. They made the original point that there would be no Netflix without other TV. Cable TV is what kind of filled Netflix up. So the points are going to go to the Vikings. With all this talk of Netflix, I think I need to binge watch some Arrested Development. We'll return after I finish a season or two or after this commercial break. The Vikings have proven themselves to be a powerhouse winning this episode. Despite this loss for the Spartans, they are still in the lead for winning Speechless Grand Champion. And now for my humble opinion. A few years ago, I went on a humanitarian trip to Pueblo Modelo, Guatemala, a village that had been wiped out by a hurricane and rebuilt with sheet metal and barbed wire. The parents worked all day, leaving their 9-year-olds who didn't even have shoes to take care of the infants. Our group constructed a freshwater system to give the community access to clean water. I was only there for 10 days, but the water system still continues to provide fresh water to them. While these trips don't change the world, they do help improve the everyday lives of the less fortunate and have a lasting positive impact. As far as the Crimea-Russia situation, I don't think that any situation involving violence and war should be taken lightly, especially with the speculation that Putin may be doing even more damage in the future. This could definitely be the beginning of another war, and we need to take the necessary precautions to stay prepared and be safe. I am one of those people who considers Netflix my significant other. It is always accessible, it's there for me when I'm upset, and it's only $8 a month for endless entertainment. Don't get me wrong, I try and keep up with the shows still on the air, but realistically, when I miss the live airtime, I can watch them online as soon as midnight. I'll always love my channel surfing days, but with technology advancing, I definitely think there's a chance of cable television fading away over time. That's all for tonight. Keep it relevant, Emerson.